TJ here with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports to bring you another NBA video. We got a 4-game, 7:30 tip slate for tonight. Was supposed to be a 5-game slate, but we have Indiana and Phoenix. That has been postponed because of COVID concerns. And we have Houston and the Spurs, and then Orlando and Brooklyn not actually featured on the main slate. So let's go ahead and dive into what we're looking at currently. Again, we have 4 games right now. And if we look at Fantasy Labs and we're looking at over-unders, we have Charlotte and we have Toronto. Toronto currently 7-point favorites, 219 over-under currently. We have Miami and we have Detroit. Miami favored, opened up at 2.5. Looks like they're 5-point favorites now because we do have a chance that a lot of those guys that have been out with COVID, like Bam, Dragic, what have you, will be back tonight. So that is still yet to be determined. We got an 8 o'clock tip, so hopefully we get that news before the slate starts at 7:30. A 217.5 over under. We also have Philadelphia 76ers and Memphis. Philly currently 1-point favorites on the road. We got a 220.5 over under right now as we stand. Opened up at 218.5. It's currently gone up 2 points, so 220.5. Then we have the late night hammer at 10 o'clock between the Atlanta Hawks and Portland. A lot of chalk going to be coming from this game. Portland currently 5-point favorites, and the over-under opened up at 236, and it's now sitting at a 234 total. So let's go ahead and let's check out some injuries right now. So when we have Charlotte, they're still without Cody Zeller, and we are still pending Gordon Hayward. So if Gordon Hayward's out, that's some pretty big news there out of Charlotte. Toronto, McCaw, Alex Len's going to be good to go. McCaw hasn't played yet this year, so same situation going on in Toronto. They're all fully healthy if Len is going to be back. Detroit, we have Frank Jackson and Killian Hayes out. And then in Miami, again, Jimmy Butler still out, Avery Bradley and Myers Leonard. But we have Bam, Dragic. Hero's out with the neck injury, so he could potentially sit. Vincent also got hurt in the last game against Philly as well. But, I mean, if we have Bam, Dragic, Harkless, Kendrick Nunn, all these guys back from COVID, that obviously shakes up the Miami value that we had been seeing for this past week. Philly's got some big injury news, obviously. Seth Curry is still out. Mike Scott and Joel Embiid going up against Miami last game are both going to be sitting tonight. I think Embiid's out for the next 2 games. So that shakes up some things here in Philly. Obviously, Dwight Howard will potentially start at the center position, and then Tony Bradley will get the backup minutes. Memphis still pending Ja Morant, so I haven't crunched numbers for them yet. A lot of these guys are priced up. I would assume their price tags start to dwindle down a little bit with the Ja Morant news coming back, because when Ja comes back, obviously that's going to affect the production that we've been seeing out of these guys as of late. So we have to keep our eye out for Ja. And then Atlanta, same guys being out with Bogdy, Dunn, and Gallinari. And then with Portland, we got big news with Nurkic. I think Nurkic is going to miss 8 weeks with a wrist, so he's out. So it looks like Enes Kanter will get the start at the 5 going up against Clint Capella. So that makes for an intriguing play as well. So let's go ahead and go team by team. Again, I haven't ran numbers for everybody because we are still pending some injury news. So when it comes to Charlotte, we're awaiting Gordon Hayward. If Gordon Hayward's out, I think that obviously becomes a LaMelo Ball play at 7,900. Again, a guy that opened up at 5,400 against Cleveland. He is now all the way up to 7,600. Just played against Toronto, 26 minutes. Obviously, this is the second of a 2-game series that we've seen a lot this year lately because of COVID. So no surprise there. But another back-to-back for Charlotte and Toronto. We saw how productive LaMelo was last game with Gordon Hayward off the floor. So I do like LaMelo if Gordon Hayward does sit, but that is yet to be seen. If he's out, I'm going to have interest in some of these guys, but more tournament plays. I think P.J. Washington played fantastic last game. With Gordon Hayward out, he gets a really big usage bump, the most on the team, actually. So all these guys I'll have interest in, but more so tournament plays. And then Toronto, the only guy I really have interest in is going to be Boucher. I don't know why that says OG, because that is Boucher. Positive about that. And then this should be OG. Okay. So yeah, Boucher at 6,900, has just been playing fantastic. Even though he hasn't been starting, he's been getting so many minutes, whether they've started Len or Aaron Baines. It's been Chris Boucher that's been getting a bulk of the minutes. So it is a good matchup against Biz down low. So I do like Boucher. More of a tournament play, but if you do land on him in cash, I really don't hate it because it is a pretty soft matchup. Let's go ahead and get to Philly, and this is the team that I really want to touch base on because of the injuries to Seth Curry still, Mike Scott, and then obviously Joel Embiid. So if we look at Philly over the last 2 years with Embiid off the floor, again, I had to get creative, so we took off Korkmaz, we took off Embiid, we took off Seth, and we took off Mike Scott, and it really wasn't too much of a sample size. So what I did is I went to the last 2 years. I took off James Ennis, who's gone with Orlando, and then we got Burks, who's a Knick now. We got Josh Richardson in Dallas, and then Al Horford in OKC. And this is the sample size that we're seeing here, which gave us a few more minutes and kind of solidified things a little bit for me. And when we're looking at it, Tobias Harris, and again, even with taking all those guys off in a 2-year sample size, he still only has 42 minutes. But I still think with the cheap price tag at 7,500 and Embiid off the floor, I still really like Tobias. Currently pegged at 35 minutes. He gets a 6.6% usage bump and a 1.44 fantasy point per minute. I currently have him pegged at 53.7 DraftKings points. So I really like Tobias in cash. And if we're looking at ownership, Tobias obviously coming in at the highest, him and Dwight Howard respectively. So a lot of chalk going to come from this game or this team specifically, because Embiid and, I guess you want to throw Mike Scott in the mix, but mostly because Embiid and Seth Curry, 2 of the 5 starters, are out. Danny Green becomes an intriguing play. He gets a 5% usage bump. He's a 0.91 fantasy point per minute. Milton's a guy that I'm probably going to go back to. I was high on him last game. He was a really good tournament play. I think he went for 10 times his value. 51. He was 5,200, so almost 10x. So he played very good against Memphis. Again, another back-to-back, another 2-game series here, so they are playing Memphis again. I think it's a really good matchup. For Milton at 5,200, that price tag didn't come up. So he gets a 7.5% usage bump. He's a 1.06 fantasy point per minute. I have him pegged for 31-ish DraftKings points, so I really like Milton in the upside. I think Maxi's in play, 3.4% usage bump, 1.12 fantasy point per minute. I have him pegged for 29 DraftKings points. And then the other guy that's most likely going to be a cash lock with Tobias Harris is going to be Dwight Howard, currently pegged at 27 minutes at 4,300, a 1.12 fantasy point per minute, have him pegged for 30 DraftKings points currently. So in terms of cash from this game, I really like Harris and I really like Dwight. I could see myself landing on Milton as well. Tony Bradley, I think, becomes a very interesting tournament play, especially if Dwight gets into foul trouble. He's a 1.42 fantasy point per minute with all these guys off the floor. Again, a 48-minute sample size, so I don't want to take it to heart too much, but I do like him as a tournament pivot. So I think there's definitely some value here in Philly with all those injuries. Moving on to Memphis, again, another team I haven't run numbers for because of Ja. If Ja is out, that Tyus price tag has come down a little bit to 5,800. Val had a fantastic game, but also missed last game against Philly. So we're going to have to wait and see what's going on with Ja here. If he's out, then I think it opens up. Oh, they didn't play Philly last game. They played Minnesota. Excuse me. So what was I just saying? Miami. Okay. Yeah, guys. Sorry. I'm a little backwards right now. It was Miami, not Memphis. Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to Memphis, again, we do need to wait and see what's going on with Ja. And I think that opens up some value here. But besides that, I'm off of them regardless if Ja is in or out. So let's go ahead and move on to Detroit and Miami. On the Detroit side of the ball, Grant is probably going to be my favorite value. I think he's not a cash lock, but I wouldn't mind him as a last piece at 7,400. But again, I do have more interest in this Atlanta-Portland game, and I do have more interest in this Philly side of the ball in Philly and Memphis. So I think Grant would probably be my favorite play in terms of who sticks out on the sheet. I think Plumlee's a decent play at 5K. It is a tough matchup, but if Bam is out, I really like that matchup even more for Plumlee. But again, just tournament plays here, even with Killian Hayes off the floor. It doesn't really intrigue my interest too much with a guy like Derrick Rose at 5,200. But I do like these guys for tournaments. But in terms of cash, I don't see myself going anywhere. If I do land on Grant as a last piece, I don't hate it, but I just don't think I'm going to. Miami. Now, Miami is definitely an interesting situation right here. We don't know what's going on with these guys in terms of COVID. If they're out again, all these guys come back into play. Achua, Precious, or Princess, if you guys want to give me crap for that still. I think he becomes a decent cash option. We got Vincent all the way up to 5K. I still think he'd be cash viable if all these guys from COVID still do sit tonight against Detroit. Kelly Olynyk at 6,100, I think, is in play. Tyler Hero at 7,200. So we have to keep an eye on Miami. We have to keep an eye on that situation. And that's going to be huge for this 4-game slate. It's going to shake up a lot of things. And moving on to the late night hammer between Atlanta and Portland, the highest over-under on the slate currently sitting at 234. So 15 points more than any other over-under. So a lot of points to be scored here between Atlanta and Portland. On the Atlanta side of the ball, I think Capella's a decent play at 6,700, more of a tournament play for me. And I don't hate Kevin Huerter or Reddish. I think they're pretty cheap and they're going to see a lot of minutes. I don't hate DeAndre Hunter either. But in terms of Huerter and Reddish, I do like them. If you're landing there as a cash piece, I think they're cheap, and I think they do have a lot of upside in this matchup against Portland, especially Kevin Huerter. You know, I love to attack shooters in these types of games, and that is something that Kevin Huerter definitely is. So at 5,100, I think that's a cheaper price tag. Again, showing the most ownership behind Trae Young, who at 8,900, I feel like I talk about him every slate, and he's just been so disappointing. The price tag is so cheap, guys, and it is a really good matchup against Portland. So I wouldn't be surprised if I landed there in cash, but we will see. I think Kevin Huerter is probably my favorite play as of now. But then on the other side of the ball with Portland, there are some fantastic plays here. I really like CJ McCollum at 8,300. I do like Dame as well. I think both of them are carrying some ownership, as you see. In terms of ownership, it's CJ, Dame, and Enes Kanter showing the most ownership. And those are honestly going to be my three favorite guys. If we're looking at the sheet with Nurk and just Nurk off the floor because Zach Collins hasn't made his season debut yet. Didn't mean to pull that up. CJ gets a 2.2% usage bump and a 1.46 fantasy point per minute, and that's a healthy sample size this year too. It was like 150 minutes. So I have CJ currently projected at 53.7 DraftKings points. So I love him for cash. A lot of people are going to go to Dame. Fantastic matchup. I don't hate having both of them, honestly. And then Kanter, I think, is going to be a cash lock as well, as long as he is starting at 5,600. He's a 1.26 fantasy point per minute with Nurk off the floor. Have him pegged for 34 DraftKings points. So I think there's a lot of value here for Portland. I think you can go to one of these guys like Covey, like Melo, Gary Trent if you need to in cash. Harry Giles is going to be a really intriguing tournament play for me with Nurkic off the floor. And if Kanter gets into foul trouble, I think he could creep up into that like 20 to 22 minute range. He's currently projected at 17 minutes. But even with that being said, and Nurkic off the floor, he gets a 1.6% usage bump and he's a 1.19 fantasy point per minute. I have him pegged for 20.5 DraftKings points right now. And again, if Kanter does get into foul trouble, and Giles does play 20 to 22 minutes, I think he's a fantastic pump play and a really good tournament play. So guys, just to cover the 4-game slate as a whole, there's not too much to talk about, and we are still pending, obviously, some significant news from Miami, Ja Morant in Memphis, and what else? Gordon Hayward in Charlotte. But right now, the ownership is showing to Tobias, CJ, Dame, Dwight Howard, Milton, Kanter. I think my favorite plays right now are going to be Tobias, CJ, and Kanter. I also do obviously like Dame. I think Dwight Howard's probably a lock as well, but I kind of lean Kanter over Dwight right now. But again, those 6 guys in terms of building a cash lineup, I think are all viable. If I had to go somewhere else after that in terms of tournaments, I do like Chris Boucher as of now. I do like Tony Bradley as a punt, and I do like Harry Giles as punts. I think there's a lot of good value here, with the injury news that we do have, and we got to keep an eye on some more. So let's make sure we're staying updated. We still have I'm recording this a little bit later than normal, so we still have about 6.5 hours of news that could break, and hopefully we do get the Miami news before these games tip off. So guys, please go ahead, and subscribe to our channel if you don't already, and make sure you have that notification bell on for our live stream tonight so you can get all the updated news that we do have. I'm not sure if Matt is going to be with me tonight, but if not, I'll be riding solo again on the stream. So yeah, make sure you have that notification bell on so when we do go live, you get that notification. You guys can come on and ask us any questions, or just me, depending on if Matt's here. Any questions you might have on the slate, and I'll do my best to answer. All right, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys later tonight. Good luck, and let's get